Going live now to the UN in New York, where the Security Council is meeting this afternoon in special session on that recent poisoning episode of a former Russian spy and his daughter in the UK. Earlier today, British Prime Minister Theresa May told the House of Commons that Britain is expelling 23 Russian diplomats in the wake of that incident. The Prime Minister said in a statement that Russia's actions represent an unlawful use of force.
The 8,203rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is letter dated 13th of March 2018 from the Chargé d'Affaires AI of the Permanent Mission of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the United Nations, addressed to the President of the Security Council S/2018/218. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2018/218, a letter dated 13th of March 2018 from the Chargé d'Affaires of the Permanent Mission of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the UN, addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to a representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for arranging this urgent meeting of the Security Council today to give the United Kingdom the opportunity to update Council colleagues on our investigation into a nerve agent attack in Salisbury. On Sunday, the 4th of March, Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found in the town centre slipping out of consciousness on a public bench and were taken to hospital by our emergency services, where they remain in a very serious condition. Investigations by world-leading experts at the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory at Porton Down, accredited by the Organisation for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, discovered that they had been exposed to a nerve agent. British police officer Nick Bailey was also exposed and remains in hospital in a serious condition. Hundreds of British citizens have been potentially exposed to this nerve agent in what was an indiscriminate and reckless act against the United Kingdom. We have deployed our military to secure and decontaminate numerous sites. The police continue an exhaustive, wide-scale investigation. Through those investigations, we have concluded that Mr. Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with a Novichok, a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia. It is not a weapon which can be manufactured by non-state actors. It is so dangerous that it requires the highest grade state laboratories and expertise. Based on the knowledge that Russia has previously produced this agent, and combined with Russia's record of conducting state-sponsored assassinations, including against former intelligence officers whom they regard as legitimate targets, the UK government concluded that it was highly likely that Russia was responsible for this reckless act. We saw only two plausible explanations. Either this was a direct attack by Russia on my country, or Russia had lost control of a military-grade nerve agent which they had developed. We requested the Russian government to provide an explanation by the end of Tuesday the 13th of March on how this Russian-produced nerve agent could have been deployed in Salisbury. They provided no credible explanation which could suggest they lost control of their nerve agent. Mr. President, we therefore have no alternative but to conclude that the Russian state was responsible for the attempted murder of Mr. Skripal and his daughter and police officer Nick Bailey, and for threatening the lives of other British citizens in Salisbury. Mr. President, this was no common crime. It was an unlawful use of force, a violation of Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, the basis of the international legal order. Mr. President, the UK is proud to have been one of the states which played an integral role in drafting the Chemical Weapons Convention, a landmark piece of international law. We are therefore dismayed that Russia has suggested that our response fails to meet the requirements of the Convention. Article 7 of the Convention calls on state parties to implement the Convention under their own legislation. The United Kingdom has enacted the Chemical Weapons Act in order to fully comply with this obligation. That legislation, together with relevant criminal law, is now guiding our investigation into this incident, as the Convention was designed. This was an attack on UK soil. Under the Convention, we have the right to lead our response, engaging the OPCW and others as appropriate. On the 8th of March, the UK formally notified the OPCW Technical Secretariat that a chemical attack had taken place on UK soil. The Russian Federation has complained that we are not using Article 9 of the Convention. On the contrary, on the 12th of March, once it became clear to us that the United Kingdom had been attacked, my Foreign Secretary summoned the Russian ambassador and sought an explanation from his government. As Article 9 is clear, we have the right to do. We have received no meaningful response. It is therefore Russia which is failing to comply with the provisions of the Convention, and this Council should not fall for their attempt to muddy the waters. In addition, the United Kingdom has welcomed the offer of technical assistance from the Director General of the OPCW, and we have invited the Technical Secretariat to independently verify our analysis. We are making every effort to expedite this process. Mr. President, let us now turn to the part of the Chemical Weapons Convention which Russia is not talking about, the part which requires state parties to declare chemical weapons stockpiles and facilities which have been used at any time since 1946 to produce chemical weapons. Chemical weapons were to be verifiably destroyed and production facilities destroyed or converted subject to approval within 10 years of entry into force of the Convention. Russia completed destruction of its declared stockpile in September 2017, 10 years later than required by the Convention and 5 years beyond the single 5-year extension period. Russia did not declare Novichok agents or production facilities associated with them as it was required to do under the Convention. No development facilities were declared. Yet we know from testimony by the Russian scientist Vil Mirzanyov that Novichoks were developed as part of the Soviet Union's offensive chemical warfare program and inherited by the Russian Federation. Such facilities associated with that program should have been declared under the CWC. Even today, a Russian politician has said that Russia has destroyed the Novichok nerve gas. Mr. President, from all of this, we can conclude that Russia is in serious breach of the Chemical Weapons Convention through its failure to declare the Novichok program. This fact alone means you should discount any arguments you hear about the possibility of other countries having inherited this technology. Had Russia declared and destroyed their own program, there might have been some truth to this. Mr. President, on the 4th of March, a weapon so horrific that it is banned from use in war was used in a peaceful city in my country. This was a reckless act carried out by people who disregard the sanctity of human life, who are indifferent to whether innocents are caught up in their attacks. They either did not care that the weapon used would be traced back to them, or mistakenly believed that they could cover their traces. Russian officials and media channels have repeatedly threatened those they consider traitors, even after the 4 March attack. Russia has a history of state-sponsored assassinations, including that of Alexander Litvinenko, poisoned by radioactive materials in my country a decade ago. Russia has a history of interfering in other countries, whether the botched coup in Montenegro, repeated cyber attacks on other states, or seeking to influence others' democratic processes. Russia has a history of flouting international law, most egregiously in Crimea, eastern Ukraine, and Georgia. Russia shows disregard for civilian life. We all remember Flight MH17, shot down by Russian proxies supplied with Russian weapons. And Russia has shown in its repeated protection of Assad's chemical weapons use that it has different standards when it comes to the use of these terrible substances. We have not jumped to conclusions. We have carried out a thorough, careful investigation which continues. We are asking the OPCW to independently verify the nerve agent used. We have offered Russia the chance to explain, but Russia has refused. We have therefore concluded that the Russian state was involved, and we have taken certain measures in response. In taking these measures, we have been clear that we have no disagreement with the people of Russia, who have been responsible for so many great achievements throughout history. It is the reckless acts of their government that we oppose. Mr. President, we are grateful for the support of so many countries around the world. We will come back to this Council as the investigations make more progress and continue to keep you informed. We have already heard the attacks and threats that Russia has made over the past few days. We know that there will be more to come. This is how Russia has acted in every other case where it has been caught flouting international law: denial, distraction, and threats. It is what Russia does. But we will not let such threats deter us. We will not weaken our resolve. We will stand firm, confident in our democracy, our rule of law, and the freedom of our people. We will stand by the values which are shared by the overwhelming majority of those in this Council, in this United Nations. And we ask you today to stand by us. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank my British colleagues for calling this important meeting. We're here today to discuss the use of a chemical weapon by one council member in the territory of another council member. Let me make one thing clear from the very beginning. The United States stands in absolute solidarity with Great Britain. The United States believes that Russia is responsible for the attack on 2 people in the United Kingdom using a military-grade nerve agent. Dozens of civilians and first responders were also exposed. Police officer Nick Bailey was the first to arrive on the scene and remains hospitalized in serious condition. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this atrocious crime. No 2 nations enjoy a stronger bond than that of the United States and the United Kingdom. Ours is truly a special relationship. When our friends in Great Britain face a challenge, the United States will always be there for them. Always. Alone, Russia's crime is worthy of this Council's action. But this is not an isolated incident. The assassination attempt in Salisbury is part of an alarming increase in the use of chemical weapons. Last year, the North Korean regime used the nerve agent VX to publicly assassinate Kim Jong-un's brother in a Malaysian airport. In Syria, the Assad regime continues to kill its own people with chemical weapons years after this Council passed Resolution 2118 to remove the threat from Syria's chemical weapons program. When the Security Council created a mechanism to investigate chemical weapons attacks, that mechanism was targeted when it began to shine a spotlight on Assad's role in killing his own people. A growing concern in all of this dangerous and destabilizing activity is Russia. Russia failed to ensure Syria destroyed its chemical weapons program. Russia killed the Joint Investigative Mechanism when it found Assad liable for chemical attacks. Russia used its veto to shield Assad 5 times last year. It has also provided cover for Syria in The Hague at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. The Russians complained recently that we criticize them too much. If the Russian government stopped using chemical weapons to assassinate its enemies, and if the Russian government stopped helping its Syrian ally to use chemical weapons to kill Syrian children, and if Russia cooperated with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons by turning over all information related to this nerve agent, we would stop talking about them. We take no pleasure in having to constantly criticize Russia, but we need Russia to stop giving us so many reasons to do so. Russia must fully cooperate with the UK's investigation and come clean about its own chemical weapons program. Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council. It is entrusted in the United Nations Charter with upholding international peace and security. It must account for its actions. If we don't take immediate concrete measures to address this now, Salisbury will not be the last place we see chemical weapons used. They could be used here in New York or in cities or of any country that sits on this council. This is a defining moment. Time and time again, member states say they oppose the use of chemical weapons under any circumstance. Now one member stands accused of using chemical weapons on the sovereign soil of another member. The credibility of this council will not survive if we fail to hold Russia accountable. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
je remercie le Royaume-Uni
I would like to thank the United Kingdom for having taken the initiative to call for this important meeting, and I thank you for the information that you've provided with regard to the information you have following the attempted assassination of 2 Russian citizens on the 4th of March in your country, in Salisbury. Allow me at the outset to our friend and ally, the United Kingdom, to renew all the support today that was expressed yesterday by the highest French authorities following an unacceptable attack which President Macron condemned unreservedly. In the name of the cardinal values which we all share, the first amongst them, the rule of law, attachment to the principles of peace and security, for which this Council is the guardian and the guarantor, I would like to express to the United Kingdom the full support and complete solidarity of France. There can be no ambiguity with regard to our position on this. Mr. President, let's be clear about this. This attempted assassination in a public area using a toxic nerve agent of military grade, as we have heard in the report, and which exposed the population to unacceptable risks. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, spoke today before the House of Commons and has stated that Russia is responsible for this attack. We have full confidence in the British investigation to quickly shed light on the precise circumstances for this use of a chemical weapon. It is essential that those that are at the origin of the use of this chemical weapon be clearly identified and prosecuted, and that all appropriate responses be provided as soon as possible to the questions that have legitimately been raised by the United Kingdom in this inquiry. Let us be clear about this. The facts and what is at stake are extremely serious. The prohibition of the use of chemical weapons is at the very heart of the non-proliferation regime, which is the foundation for our system of collective security, created and enshrined by this Council and all of its members. The haphazard re-emergence of these barbaric weapons with such deadly effects, which can be seen by their recurrent use in Syria and in the Middle East, but also in Asia and now in Europe, cannot be tolerated. This flouts the principles on which peace and security are founded. It undermines the architecture of non-proliferation built stone by stone over the course of decades, and it calls into question strategic stability. We've pointed out several times before this Council that there is a risk of the re-emergence of these weapons and their proliferation towards all kinds of actors, and the threat that this situation would pose for the collective security system which we have gradually built together. Let us be very aware that here we have reached a new stage, namely the use of a substance that was never declared to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the use of which is prohibited by the Convention, and we've seen it used in a public area on the territory of a European country. Mr. President, France will never accept impunity for those who use or develop toxic agents. We recall here our full support for existing institutions, particularly the OPCW. This is also the reason why France last January launched an international partnership aimed at supporting existing instruments to fight impunity in the use of these weapons. Mr. President, we, more than ever before, must remain mobilized in our fight against proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and against the impunity of those who plan to use them. It is a priority for all of us, a major responsibility, and one of those that belongs to the Security Council, and according to which we shall be judged. You can you can be assured of France's resolute commitment alongside our partners and allies within this Council and in all circumstances which require this response. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. سيد الرئيس يعقد
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Security Council convened this meeting so as to discuss the potential use of a chemical weapon. Whatever the wording of the title of the agenda item that we are discussing today, letter by the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of the UK or any other wording, we think that this issue is a true danger. It has an impact on the safety of civilians, and this could undermine relations amongst member states. Now, our position of principle is very firm. We condemn the production and use of chemical weapons as well as their possession, stockpiling, preservation, or transport, directly or indirectly. And we base ourselves on Article 1 of the Chemical Weapons Convention, and we call upon all member states who ratify the convention to adhere to this and put an end to all of these stockpiles of chemical and toxic weapons. The United Kingdom called for and convened this meeting because of the hostile act committed on the territory of that country. And this is also a violation of international conventions, and in particular the one on chemical weapons, which is why we support the right of the United Kingdom to carry out all the necessary investigations on this kind of attack and to undertake all the necessary measures in this regard. And lastly, we call upon all of the states who have special responsibility in maintaining international peace and security, and all other states as well, to continue acting in line with the United Nations Charter and undertake very clear and sincere steps in order to build a world free of chemical weapons and free of weapons of mass destruction. And we recall here Resolution 2325 adopted in 2016. The resolution underscored the need to put an end to the proliferation of all kinds of weapons, chemical, biological, or nuclear, who are a danger for international peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Kuwait for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Equatorial Guinea.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The Republic of Equatorial Guinea learnt of the incident of the attack using a chemical nerve agent in Salisbury, United Kingdom, and we hope that events such as these will be duly investigated and the results of those investigations made public, and those responsible will face justice. With regard to the accusations with regard to the involvement of the Russian Federation in the event, the accusation made by the United Kingdom, the Equatorial Guinea hopes that both parties, the UK and the Russian Federation, will be able to resolve the situation in the most appropriate way possible through direct contact and by fully clarifying the facts. That's why we recommend that whilst this investigation is being carried out, both parties, the Russian Federation and the United Kingdom, show moderation, and we invite both parties to cooperate closely in the investigations being carried out in order to shed light on this situation. We appreciate the initiative of the United Kingdom to invite independent experts to carry out the necessary analyses in order to produce results that will be able to explain this very difficult situation. I conclude my brief comments, Mr. President, making clear that the Republic of Equatorial Guinea is completely against the production and storage and distribution and use of any chemical, biological, bacteriological, or other similar products against human beings, because this is contrary to international law in this regard. Therefore, we fully condemn this kind of use, whoever uses these weapons, and we hope that Mr. Skripal and his daughter and the others affected will recover as soon as possible, those that have been affected by this incident. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Equatorial Guinea for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his initiative. Poland is gravely concerned by information of the use of nerve agent in an attempt to murder Mr. Sergei Skripal and his daughter, Mrs. Julia Skripal, which endanger lives of innocent civilians. Poland has been always a committed supporter of curbing chemical weapons. In this context, we condemn this unprecedented attack on the territory of the United Kingdom, the first of this kind in Europe after the Second World War. After continued use of chemicals as weapons in Syria, this case is another clear example of violation of the international law and the provisions of the Convention of the Prohibition of the Development, Production, stockpiling and use of chemical weapons and on their destruction. We express our full solidarity with the British people and the British government, as well as our readiness to support our close ally and European partner in conduct of the investigation. At the same time, we call on Russia to address the UK's questions and appropriately cooperate with the OPCW in this regard. Poland expresses its strong conviction that there is no place for impunity. Those responsible for the use of chemical weapons must and should be held accountable. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Poland for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Peru.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President, we thank you for convening this meeting, and we'd like to thank the United Kingdom for the information they've shared with us. In accordance with Chapter 6 of the Charter, we believe it's important to ensure the Council is informed with regard to situations which could become an international dispute. Peru believes that the use of chemical weapons per se is a threat to international peace and security, and a violation for the non-proliferation regime, and which puts at risk the lives of civilians. This is why we would like to express our grave concern at the use of a nerve agent in a public space, which has seriously endangered the lives of at least 3 people in the United Kingdom. What has occurred is lamentable, and we express our solidarity with the victims. The incident must be investigated in the framework of the rule of law and due process through the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and other competent bodies. The parties involved must fully cooperate in a credible investigation which will determine who is responsible and what sanctions are to be applied in the case, in accordance with applicable international law. Finally, we would urge channels of communication to remain open to resolve this situation. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Peru for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sweden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you very much to the delegation of the United Kingdom for updating the Security Council on the use of nerve agents in Salisbury on the 4th of March. Sweden condemns in the strongest terms the attempted murder on UK soil using a nerve agent. We stress the seriousness of this incident, unprecedented in Europe in recent years. Those responsible for the attack must be identified and held to account for their heinous actions. Given that a nerve agent developed as a chemical weapon has been used and the possibility that the attempted murder have links to state actors, Sweden supports the decision by the United Kingdom to bring this issue to the attention of the Security Council and other relevant bodies such as the OPCW. We stand by the United Kingdom, and we, like other EU partners, express our strong solidarity with the UK government and support its efforts in dealing with this grave security issue. Mr. President, we note that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, in her letter to the Secretary General, states that the class of chemical warfare agents used was originally developed by the Soviet Union and then inherited by the Russian Federation. Given this, and taking into account the principal victim's background, we support the UK's request that Russia provide an account of how the agent could have come to be deployed in Salisbury. Let me also take this opportunity to stress the importance Sweden attaches to the ban on chemical weapons. These cruel and illegal weapons kill indiscriminately and have no place in the world. We need to ensure that the integrity of the Chemical Weapons Conventions is fully respected. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Sweden for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
la Côte d'Ivoire a
Côte
appris
d'Ivoire
avec une vive émotion
learned with great distress of the use of neurotoxic chemical agent on British soil on the 4th of March 2018 in Salisbury. We express our sincere solidarity to the authorities of the United Kingdom and wish full and speedy recovery to the contaminated. We have always condemned and continue condemning any use of chemical weapons, whatever the form. We therefore request that all possible light be shed on the event which took place in Salisbury. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Côte d'Ivoire for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kazakhstan.
Mr. President, Kazakhstan is known for its clear and consistent position of an uncompromising opponent of all types of weapons of mass destruction, including chemical weapons. We condemn any use of weapons of mass destruction as immoral, inhuman, and contrary to the principles of humanity. We express our deep concern over the tragic incident with the possible use of chemical warfare agent on the territory of the United Kingdom. It is impermissible to use the chemical agents against anyone and anywhere. At the same time, since it is a very politically sensitive issue, we should be extremely cautious and careful in drawing hastily conclusions without credible and convincing facts on the ground. The incident should be carefully investigated and any conclusions should be substantiated. We believe that any international response to this incident should be considered only after the exhaustive, transparent, objective, and impartial investigation in accordance with the existing norms of international law, primarily on the basis of the provisions of the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. We hope that two parties will be able to resolve all the contradictions and disputes between them by diplomatic means and normalize British-Russian relations for the benefit of global stability and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kazakhstan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bolivia.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We take note of the information provided today with regard to the events that took place on the 4th of March. Bolivia once again expresses our firm and categoric condemnation of the use of chemical weapons. This is unjustifiable and criminal by whoever commits these crimes and wherever they commit them. This is a serious threat to international peace and security, and we hope that an investigation will be carried out in a methodological, complete, comprehensive way through the competent bodies. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Bolivia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have been following the news about the nerve agent attack in Salisbury, UK. We express our sympathy for and solidarity with the families of the victims, as well as with the people and government of the United Kingdom. We have noted the letter by the Prime Minister of the UK addressed to the Secretary General on the incident circulated yesterday, and we appreciate the UK delegation for the briefing that we have received a while ago. Our position on the use of chemical weapons is well known, and we strongly condemn any use of chemical weapons by any state or non-state actor. Use of chemicals as weapons is unacceptable, and it constitutes a serious violation under international law. This said, we hope the necessary independent investigation will be conducted and also vetted on the Salisbury incident, including by undertaking consultation and exchange of information on the basis of the relevant provisions of the Chemical Weapons Convention, with a view to bringing those responsible to justice. We believe cooperation between Russia and the UK in good faith is very critical to ensure that this issue will not get out of hand and undermine even further relations between the two countries. In this regard, we are hopeful and trust that given the very justified concern of the UK, all concerned will provide full cooperation so that the matter will be addressed in a fair manner, also in a way that would help allay the concerns of the United Kingdom. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Ethiopia for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, China has noted the recent poisoning incident in the UK. We take note of the statements made by relevant countries on this incident. We hope that a comprehensive, objective, and impartial investigation could be conducted based on facts in accordance with relevant international rules and reach an evidence-based conclusion that can stand the test of facts and history. We hope relevant parties could properly handle this issue through appropriate channels. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Hi everybody, just a quick reminder, Mox News survives solely on your tips and contributions. It's easy to make a contribution or a tip or leave a tip at moxnews.com, or there are clickable links in the text body of this video. It should take the average person, most people, probably less than 2 minutes. Thanks very much for your time and your continued support. Stay cool, Wednesdays. This war is going to end. Till that day.
And I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, yesterday, after the Security Council has circulated to it the letter from the British Prime Minister, after that the United Kingdom requested that closed consultations be held. We asked the President of the Security Council to change the format of the meeting and change it from closed consultations to an open briefing. And we did this not without thinking. We did this because we wanted to make sure that everyone should see what is happening here. Because the letter, which contains completely irresponsible statements, in which it is even difficult for me to comment while using diplomatic vocabulary, it contains threats to a sovereign state, towards a permanent member of Security Council, which is at variance with international law and the chapters 2.4 of the UN Charter. I would like to understand the following. Do our British colleagues understand this? And the first question that we want to put is this: why is it that the representatives of the United Kingdom are dragging this issue into the Security Council? And at the same time, they ignore the procedures which London, in line with their own international commitments, has to abide by, namely involving the specialized organizations. We're talking about the use of a toxic chemical on British soil. We see that the answer to this is obvious. The reason this is being dragged into the Security Council, because they do understand that the real experts, the genuine experts on chemical weapons, are in the Hague, and those experts will not be convinced by their arguments. In other words, they are afraid of having a real, genuine, professional discussion of this topic. This shows that the initiators of this meeting are being guided by something completely different. The Russian Federation thinks that it's completely unacceptable to launch unjustified accusations as contained in the letter from Theresa May dated 13th of March to the Secretary General of the UN. It states that we had something to do with the use of toxic agents in Salisbury. And we were given an ultimatum and requested in 24 hours to admit that we committed a crime. In other words, confess. We do not speak the language of ultimatums. We do not use that language with anyone. And we will not allow to be spoken to in that language either. But we are polite. And on the 13th of March, we did send a note to the Foreign Office where we reaffirmed that we had nothing to do with this incident and asked for the samples of the substance being used and also asked for a joint investigation. All the more so since one of the people who impacted was a Russian national. This request was refused. In other words, a hysterical atmosphere is being created by London and also being completely non-transparent in this. We saw today the announcement that Russian diplomats are being expelled and bilateral relations are being frozen. I want to ask my UK colleague whether this applies to the UN as well. We also saw announcements about a prepared cyber attack against Russia. We would like to warn that this will not remain without reaction on our part. We are compelled to make the following conclusion, that the authorities of the UK are interested in finding the truth and last. They're guided by something else. They're using the propaganda war ways of recent years, and they are trying to thus influence the public, which is very easy to influence and not well educated. But this does not have any facts without that, other than the unsubstantiated claim that there is a Russian trace in all of this. This is not the first time when Russian nationals in the UK or people from Russia in the UK have their life endangered, where such instances are not investigated or where we're not allowed to become acquainted with such investigations. London should first try and determine what it is that's happening on their territory before going ahead and accusing others, because that's what polite people do. We would suggest to the British side to immediately involve the procedures in Chapter 9.2 of the Convention on Chemical Weapons, because it provides for requests for explanation and providing answers to the requesting state as quickly as possible, and in any event, no later than 10 days after the request was received. The British colleagues do know about that, but they're in no hurry of invoking the convention which they're party to. We demand that material proof be provided of the allegedly found Russian trace in this high-resonance event. Without this stating that there is incontrovertible truth is not something that we can take into account. And up until now, we have not seen anything besides stating that this is highly likely. In such a situation, it would be legitimate to approach the Technical Secretariat of OPCW and ask them to carry out an independent laboratory analysis that the British authorities, of the samples that the British authorities have. Now, a few words about the chemical side of it. In the Russian Federation, no scientific research or development work under the title Novichok were carried out. Since the beginning of the 1970s, a whole number of countries implemented programs on creating new types of chemical and paralytic agents, in particular in the United States and in the Soviet Union. And this was called VX. In line with a decree by the President of the Russian Federation in 1992, the Soviet developmental work in the area of chemical weapons in Russia were stopped. In 2017, the Russian Federation completed the destruction of all existing stocks of chemical weapons, and this has been verified by the relevant international entity, namely the Organization on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. By the way, the United States has not, to date, destroyed their chemical stockpile. In the middle of the 1990s, the Western Special Services moved to the West a number of our specialists, and their names are well known. And also some documentation was taken out of our country and continued their work in this area, including in the US and the UK. The positive results that they've obtained on creating new chemical agents, which for some reason in the West are classified as Novichok, has been confirmed and reflected in more than 200 open sources of NATO countries, and we do have the reference to that, and we stand ready to provide you with them. The identification per se of the toxic substance used in the incident was carried out in Portsdown, which is a scientific center of the Ministry of Defense. This is the place which was a basis for the development of chemical weapons, including the chemical weapons of this kind. The most probable source origin for this chemical are the countries which have, since the end of the 90s, been carrying out intensive research on these kinds of weapons, including the UK. But we're not chemists here. Let me just quote the opinion of a professional chemist. For the British specialists to be perfectly confident in stating that this gas is a Novichok kind of gas and not any other kind, they need to have the what we call control standard. In order to prove that that is that exact compound, it needs to be compared to a standard. If they state that this gas is a Novichok kind of gas, well, that a priori means that they have a standard for this substance. In other words, they have a collection and they have the formula. And this is the most important point in this whole story. In other words, if the UK is so firmly convinced this is the Novichok gas, then that means that they have the samples of this and they have the formula for this and they're capable of manufacturing that. Mr. President, we're living in very, very special times. In front of our eyes, incredible things are happening. The process of replacing the presumption of innocence with the presumption of guilt is taking place. And this criminal law principle is now being transferred into international relations. And today, Ambassador Haley, as an experienced chemist and an expert in that area, talked today about the crimes committed by Russia. We have known for a very long time that for you, in order to determine who is a guilty party, no investigation is needed. In the letter by the Prime Minister of the UK, it is stated that this is highly likely. But even in this, you have exceeded your reliable ally. If the Soviet prosecutor Vyshinsky thought that confession was the best kind of proof, well, now, using the expression of Minister Lavrov, what is the best kind of proof is suspicion. It is no longer necessary to show to the Council test tubes with unknown white substance in it. It is enough to send a letter which contains an egregious attitude towards a sovereign state. And we are witnessing the same when it comes to Syria. And now Russia is being pushed towards the number of those who are violating the convention. Let me simply remind you about the UK involvement in illegal attacks on independent states, including using unsubstantiated proof. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya. This led to numerous suffering amongst civilians. Don't forget that the UK is well known as a state which uses targeted assassinations by drones. And hearing from you invectives against us is something that is odd. And when there is no proof behind them, it's all the more odd. In jurisprudence and in life in general, there is a principle. The principle qui bono or qui prodest. In other words, look for those for whose benefit this is being done. Well, what do you think? This incident is this something that benefits Russia on the eve of presidential elections and the World Football Championship? But I can name a number of countries who are, but abiding by the principle of the presumption of innocence, I will not name them. But I can think of a number of countries who would benefit a great deal from this incident and accusing Russia of it. What do you think? What could be the motivation that the Prime Minister of UK is using that Russia could have for the attempt on Sergei Skripal, who, after the investigation, after he served his sentence, then pardoned and given over to the British, was no longer of any kind of threat to my country. But he is a perfect victim, which could justify any unthinkable lie, any kind of dirt, or any kind of black PR tarnishing Russia. We have stated many a time that anything along those lines, any kind of a provocation before a certain events could happen. And today we're witnessing the fact that the authorities of the UK are consciously trying to tarnish Russia, stooping to any low. Arthur Conan Doyle, the British classic, for fame for his country and very popular in Russia, has a series of stories about Sherlock Holmes, and he has a hapless character in those stories, Inspector Lestrade from Scotland Yard. He doesn't have the method of deduction. He's not particularly smart. His role is to be the background for the extraordinary detective powers of Sherlock Holmes. Lestrade latches on something that is on the surface of a crime and is in a hurry to provide banal conclusions, only to be overturned by Sherlock Holmes, who always finds what is behind the crime and what is the motive for it. Of course, I am not trying to say that those who work in Scotland Yard today are not professional. God guard me from that. But I do think that we could all stand to benefit from having a Sherlock Holmes with us today. But the collective Inspector Lestrade today are the high-level members of the UK government who are coming up with egregious, superficial and unsupported accusations, which have far-reaching consequences. Russia calls upon the officials of the UK to give up on the imperial practices which belong in the 19th century, give up on ultimatums and threats and unsupported accusations, give up with their colonial habits and get back to the area which is governed by law. In such situations, similar to what we have in the letter by Theresa May, normally what should be done is using instruments of legal assistance. Now, to sum up, let me say once again, Russia had nothing to do with this incident. The ultimatum from London is something that we consider to be something that we cannot pay attention to. And we expect, we consider null and void. We expect that the United Kingdom will act in strict adherence with the Convention of Chemical Weapons and other international instruments, including the European Convention on Legal Assistance on Criminal Matters, and will provide the samples of substances that the UK investigation is referring to for joint investigation, since you are saying that they are Russian in origin. And this is not an optional, this is a mandatory requirement under the Convention. We stand ready for such an investigation. We have nothing to fear, we have nothing to hide. The mechanism for the 9.2 of the Convention on Chemical Weapons is something that we've already mentioned. If the explanations provided are insufficient, well, then we can turn to the governing body of the OPCW. This is the only civilized way of settling the issue. Since we are being accused of violating the Convention without any justification, well, there is no other way out. And fruitless dialogue with specialists from other specialists in this area is something that we cannot avoid. We are ready to an open and constructive cooperation within the framework of OPCW. In conclusion, Mr. President, we would like to disseminate a draft statement for the press which sums up my statement and emphasizes the fact that the mechanisms in Chapter 9 of the Chemical Weapons Conventions are mentioned, and we hope and expect that all members of the Council will support this. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Kingdom of the Netherlands supports remarks by the representative of the United Kingdom, who brought to our attention the urgent matter before us today. I would like to underline 3 points. First, solidarity with the United Kingdom. Second, concern over the use of a chemical weapon. And third, the need for accountability. My first point, solidarity. Until the beginning of this month, it was hard to imagine a more peaceful place in the world than Salisbury, a quiet, historic town among the rolling hills of southern England. Then the peace was brutally disturbed. A man and his daughter were poisoned with the use of a nerve agent. The United Kingdom was shocked. the world was shocked, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands was shocked. On behalf of my government, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Stef Blok, has strongly condemned the attack and has expressed our solidarity with the United Kingdom. People in the Netherlands feel for Yulia and Sergei Skripal, and we hope for the recovery of all the victims. We fully understand the outrage of the UK authorities. We also understand why this new incident is particularly painful for the people of the United Kingdom, who still have vivid memories of the brutal murder of Mr. Litvinenko with the use of radioactive polonium in the heart of London. Now the United Kingdom finds itself confronted with a new and different case, of which the full details are yet to be determined. But one thing is beyond doubt already. No state can or should accept attacks taking place on its sovereign territory. The United Kingdom can count on the full solidarity of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. My second point, the use of a chemical weapon. We express our grave concern over the type of weapon that was used in this attack, a military-grade nerve agent, a substance that no regular criminal could easily get his hands on. This is the first time since the end of the Second World War that a nerve agent has been used in Europe. The recklessness of this act is beyond words. This nerve agent was used in a public space with many unsuspecting civilians around. It could have had even more horrible effects than has been the case. And I would also like to reiterate that any use of chemical weapons is abhorrent. The Kingdom of the Netherlands regards this as a threat to international peace and security. Therefore, it should be a matter of concern for this Council. And we commend the United Kingdom for bringing it to our attention. After the recent chemical weapons attacks in Syria, the attack in the UK is another warning to the world that we must step up our vigilance to prevent the use of these weapons of mass destruction. And we underline the important role of the OPCW in The Hague in this regard. This brings me to my third and final point, accountability. There can be no impunity for this crime. My government stated that the Kingdom of the Netherlands fully supports the UK in its quest for the truth, and we call on all other countries to do so as well. The UK authorities had urged the Russian Federation to provide answers to the questions that they have by yesterday. We can understand why, after Russia's failure to do so, Prime Minister May announced bilateral measures earlier today. We see no reason for Russia to continue to refuse the UK's request. Nor do we see any legitimate reason why anyone should try to delay, sidetrack, second-guess, or discredit the investigation carried out by the UK authorities. The international community cannot shrug its shoulders over this crime as if nothing happened. The United Nations, this Council, and all Member States should cooperate with the United Kingdom as it further investigates this gruesome act. The perpetrators should be brought to justice. I will now resume my function as President of the Council. The representative of the United Kingdom has asked for the floor to make a further statement. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My Russian colleague asked some questions, and I thought I would answer. He asked, why did we come to the United Nations Security Council? Isn't the Security Council where countries come when there's been a threat to international peace and security, when there has been an unlawful attack on them? He asked if we'll work with Russia here. Of course we will work with Russia here. We believe in the United Nations and its Security Council. We believe in the international rules-based system. We want this council to work together to uphold international peace and security and to resolve conflict together. Of course, we will work with Russia to achieve those aims here in this council. I set out in detail how the Convention on Chemical Weapons works, and in particular its Article 9. Council members have heard from me, you've heard from the Russian colleague. I won't go into it in great detail again. I will simply say that under Article 9, we have asked Russia for an explanation. Russia's response was to say they considered our request to be null and void. We have also asked the OPCW to support us with an independent verification of our analysis. The Russian colleague talked about samples, but again, this is a misunderstanding of the Convention. There are no provisions in the Convention which require the UK to share samples collected as part of a criminal investigation. The Chemical Weapons Convention does provide inspected state parties with a right to have duplicate copies of samples taken for the purposes of an inspection. But Russia is not an inspected state party in this case. We're asked why we were so keen to ask for a quick answer. That comes from our past experience. One of the key tactics in the Russian playbook is to delay, distract, to mire in procedural delay. And we know that, of course, from the sad, tragic Litvinenko case in 2006. We waited for months in the hope that Russia would cooperate with our requests to extradite and investigate the known suspects. We waited in vain. We will not make the same mistake again. And finally, my Russian colleague quotes fiction. Let me quote the Russian president when we think about who benefits. In 2010, he said, quote, "Traitors will kick the bucket, believe me. Those other folks betrayed their friends, their brothers in arms. Whatever they got in exchange for it, those 30 pieces of silver they were given, they will choke on them." Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement, and the representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't plan to have a detailed discussion with my British colleague. I've already said everything I wanted to say during my statement. I simply wanted to underscore one thing, that we didn't have a proper request in line with the Convention on Chemical Weapons, for which we were ready and to which we are ready. What we were given was a 24-hour ultimatum. Once again, let me underscore this, that this is the format in which we will not respond to unsubstantiated allegations, which were launched against us before any kind of answer received from us. But we are ready to cooperate with the British government in order to investigate this unfortunate incident. I do not think that anything that I said earlier is in contradiction with this statement of mine right now. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.